Good evening, class. We're sorry we couldn't join you tonight, but we are going to present either the first or second half of case study number 1 on childhood obesity. My name is John Johnson.
And my name is Bartholomew Sevier.
Our presentation objectives tonight will be to provide a background on the case study subject, define sleep apnea and explain the relationship between sleep apnea and obesity, identify the recommended daily allowances for the patient's age group of the vitamins and minerals identified as possibly being deficient, identify the macronutrients that are contributing to the patient's weight challenges such as whole grains, fruits and vegetables, saturated fat, cholesterol, and dietary fiber intake.
We're also going to be explaining how each nutrient deficiency and/or excess of that nutrient can impact the proper growth and development of the patient, and what the goals for weight loss in the pediatric population are, and under what circumstances might weight loss in someone like Missy be appropriate.
Background on Missy. She's 10 years old in the 5th grade. She comes from biracial parentage. Her father is African American and her mother is Caucasian. She has one sister who's 5 years old. We aren't given any information on her. Missy herself is 4'9" and weighs 115 pounds, so as you can see, she's quite overweight. But her parents say she's been overweight since birth. According to the budget cuts that were explained to the physical education, the art, and the music programs at her school, she most likely attends a poorer inner-city public school, and she's mostly physically inactive due to her preference for reading and video games over working outside or exercising. Next slide.
So Missy's been diagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea. The sleep apnea is secondary to obesity and physical inactivity. Next slide.
Sleep apnea and obesity. Sleep apnea can come in two forms. Central, which comes from improper neuronal action potential in the brain, and the other type is obstructive, which comes from a blockage of the throat that happens from increased pressure on relaxed muscles when the person is sleeping. Correlations have been discovered between obesity and obstructive sleep apnea because the buildup of adipose tissue in the throat increases the pressure that is placed on the throat, so it closes much easier when the patient's asleep. Next slide.
We've laid out on this slide some of the recommended daily allowances for someone like Missy. After calculating all of them in the MyPlate program, we found that with her diet, the example of the one-day diet, she was not deficient in any of her vitamins or minerals. The two things we did find, however, is that she was in excess with sodium and folates. Next slide.
Her macronutrient struggles come primarily from overconsumption of calories. As you can see, she takes in about 4,800 a day. And she takes in almost 50% of her daily calories from fats as opposed to the recommendation of 25 to 35%. As you can see, you're recommended to take in 20% of your carbohydrates in the form of fiber, but she only took in 5, so there's a deficiency there, which means her carbohydrates are refined sugars, the unhealthy type. Her saturated fats make up 15% of her daily calories, when the recommendation is less than 10. Her cholesterol is almost 4 times the recommended allowance. As you can see, it's almost 1,200 milligrams as opposed to less than 300 as a recommendation. The only fruits she's consuming are the grape jelly, which is also full of sugars, and the vegetables she's consuming are prepared in the most unhealthy of ways.
Pretty much the only reason that she's able to meet any of her nutrient and vitamin needs is because of fortified bread that she's eating. So what this means for Missy is really she's over-consuming fats. She's over-consuming especially saturated fats. She's got a large overconsumption of cholesterol, which could be a problem for her in the future. She's definitely over-consuming sodium as well, and over-consuming folates, which we're going to touch on a little bit later. And she's definitely fairly deficient by only 3 grams actually, but still significantly deficient in fiber. Definitely in organic fiber and not fiber added to her bread. So one of the results of overconsumptions of fats was laid out in an article that was published in the Academy of Nutrients and Dietetics. This article gave a lot of evidence for that would suggest that high intake of dietary fat is associated with a higher rate of adiposity or obesity in youth. Next slide. She also has a huge intake of sodium, and the recommended sodium intake for somebody who is not African American or has hypertension, diabetes, or chronic kidney disease is somewhere around 2,300 milligrams a day, and her sodium intake is definitely a lot higher than that. According to the American Heart Association, some of the risk of increased or a high intake of sodium can be increased risk for stroke, heart failure, osteoporosis, stomach cancers, and kidney diseases. She also has a really high folic intake. According to the study published in the Cancer Epidemiology, Biomarker and Prevention Journal, they observed in studies that high folate intake normally goes to reduce certain cancers or growths or malignancies in the body, but at some point when you have too much of a folic intake, it can do the opposite and start to help grow different cancers that are already present in the body. So as she gets older, that can be a problem for her if she continues the folic intake that she has now. So some of her goals for pediatric weight loss, it's suggested that somebody at her age is still going to grow, that she doesn't try to cut back on her weight, but merely let herself grow into that weight. So not cutting back on weight, but just maintaining a healthy weight is important for her. She also wants to replace a lot of her empty calories with nutrient-rich calories and try to get as many nutrients as she can from organic means, more fruits and vegetables, and less pre-made and packaged foods. I think she needs to also be consulting a physician so that they can watch her weight. And so pretty much to sum it up,
basically Missy is an obese elementary age child who consumes more than twice her recommendation of calories daily. She's not an isolated example. Many children are brought up in an environment where they eat what they can. It might not be the healthiest thing, but they eat it anyway. We see that this might be the case with Missy. She's eating a lot of prepared and packaged foods and sodas, as well as eating pretty much anything fried, and these things are going to couple together and group together to give her heart problems later, as well as continue her obesity. And if she doesn't change her eating habits immediately, she's going to be encountering some adult diseases at a childhood age, and unfortunately they might not be able to reverse the damage done if she doesn't get it under control quickly. She needs to consult a physician to improve her lifestyle, as well as to begin to eat more moderate amounts of more healthy foods and increase her level of physical activity.
Yeah, a lot of things that she looks at, especially with her extreme amounts of sodium intake that she has, is an increased risk for hypertension, and hypertension can lead to diabetes and a lot of other coronary heart problems in the future. So our suggestion for this patient would be decrease the amount of calories that you're taking in per day, and lower your sodium, lower your folic intakes, and then just try to replace a lot of your empty calories. Bring in your calorie percentage, or grams percentage per day in calories up a little bit, bringing down the fats, and just try to replace the foods you're eating with healthier foods. All right, thank you very much.